We are about to enter the realm of everybody already knew that. Modern AAA games are all about restrictions. They are afraid more than ever that gamers might, in their own playthrough of a single-player game, take an action that would not be approved of. Veilguard is a recent example. The romances, the type of magic you can use, the character you can create, the way you are permitted to respond to others. The range of characters you can create are extremely muted. The extremes of renegade versus paragon, or good versus evil choices are long gone, after being one of the studio's most defining features. KOTOR 3 would never be permitted to have dark side choices, or, more likely, the dark side choices would be moralized to actually be just as good as the light side choices. This is an increasingly common trend as bestial or diverse races are made more and more human over time. Dungeons & Dragons is a prime example of this, as goblins and orcs were monumentally different from humans at one point, and not only in shallow appearances, but from their general tendencies and their culture. Now, most humanoids are effectively human, but this color, or with horns. And the natural center of drow, as cruel and hateful of their surface cousins, is now on the fringes, as all races now are more inclined to the human can-be-anything center. You cannot offend or hurt your allies, there is no conflict in the party, there is no capacity for doing evil. Star Wars Outlaws is about a criminal who is not allowed to do any crimes. AAA games are regularly costing over $100 million, with larger-than-ever studios and taking twice as long to make. More time, money, and manpower, as well as more education and expertise in the industry. When an indie game or a AA game has underdeveloped features, it is entirely understandable. We can look at that and say, well, they just did not have enough resources. When AAA does this, it's not about resources, it is entirely by choice. So Veilguard intentionally has a limited character customization system and stunted dialogue choices that really mean nothing. Now, what have the modern audience writers done for the last decade? Comics and games are full of their doppelgangers, not only in appearance, but with morality-laden scenes where they force the viewer to watch their therapy session involving some long-held hatred of classmates or parents or someone in the real world who just did not understand. They used to be doing fetish fanfics with self-insert vapid characters who are all super strong, need no mentor, learn no lessons from the errors they have never made, and everyone claps whenever they say the most mundane things. Yet, their original works failed. The franchises they continue failed. They are burning through the audience's patience for remakes and remasters. Games and franchises made in the era of the Satanic Panic, the violence in video game Karens, the feminist frequency, and other puritanical outsiders. The 2020 Puritans are demanding censorship above and beyond what was demanded between 1980 and 2010. These censorship-loving groups push for thousands of studies on the negative effects of video games, trying to prove games cause sexism, violence, radicalization, bigotry, or whatever else. Studies which constantly prove them wrong, always backfiring, yet will always be ignored as they feed their need to attack the gamers. It'd be harder to find a remaster that has not been censored today, and it's always no big deal. Stop talking about it, it's just a little change. This was problematic. It always was a bad thing, and now that it's been fixed, we have wheelchairs in D&D because the creators now fetishize disability. And you know, none of them have ever used or even had to push a wheelchair across morning grass, or they know there's no getting through the roots of a wild forest, over the dunes of a desert, up a spiral staircase in an ancient castle. And if you're ever pressed on this, it's a fantasy world. They just use magic to undo all the downsides of the disability. If you have the full mobility of any other character as someone in a wheelchair, then that is not a disability. That is a cosmetic skin in a mobile game. We have people whose gospel is diversity, yet every protagonist has the same limited scope of haircut, attitude, and background, the same 2020 coastal American perpetual victim being forced on the rest of the world. Games today are fanfics. They are a mix of diary, shipping, lashing out against what their college professor told them is to blame for every problem in their lives. These are the types of writers and artists whose limit to creativity is recoloring screen grabs from an anime, adding fetish flavor text based on whatever orientation they feel gets them the most social credit score at the moment, and proclaiming they fix the original artist's bigotry, which is always something they've completely made up, so they have a dragon to slay for their sycophant followers. Instead of their fantasies being put in front of tens of similarly minded people on Tumblr, they're pushing their kinks and modern political ideologues on longtime fans who just wanted a cool monster slaying adventure in a grim fantasy world, like everything before in that franchise. But what about the stuff that hasn't been built by someone else? Concord is a unique IP meant for a modern audience. It harms nothing else by existing. Well, other than Sony's shareholders, of course. Sometimes there are just things not meant for you. Alternative markets do exist. Easy example is Harlequin or dark romances, Twilight, 50 Shades of Grey. All very successful and definitely not made for us. Yet you don't have a bunch of guys getting into those IPs and industries, trying to force every single well-known IP for women to become stories meant for guys. The misandrous female gaze is on nobody's radar. Yet, when world-building, sexy females, tough cool guys are in a story aimed at guys, there is an extreme double standard. Just like novels meant for women have vapid, shirtless, muscular dudes, or freakish monsters being banged by plain, blank slate teen girls or wine moms that allow women to identify with, women can objectify men all they want. Anyone can try to write a Harlequin romance meant for guys. It will fail because the intended audience, guys, won't care, and the built-in audience, women, won't like the changes. You have every right to make it, and everyone else has the right to criticize and not buy it. And that's what's happening in gaming to consistent failure, with decades-old franchises that coast off the brand for a while. Yet all of them start to fail over time because they lose the original fan base, yet cannot attract the so-called modern audience. How many times have you heard modern devs, activists, journalists insist that they can only play a game with a protagonist that looks and thinks just like them? Never mind for a moment how openly racist and sexist it is to declare to the world that the only people you can ever have empathy for look exactly like yourselves, specifically in terms of your gender and skin color. Never mind that. How does their logic work even for the audience they're courting? Just think about this for a moment logically. You have people who can only identify with a character that is exactly like themselves, putting self-inserts into the stories they tell for other people who can also only identify with someone who looks exactly like themselves. So, unless the modern writer looks exactly like the modern audience, they are making stories where the only modern audience is themselves. However, everyone is different. You are not going to have a scenario where you can make something creative and everyone can look at it and say, yeah, that person looks just like me, so I am allowed to like it. And here's what they've completely missed in their quest for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Gamers do not and never cared that the character looks just like them. Nobody looks like Son Goku, an alien monkey made in Japan that come from another world, who is popular the world over. Lord of the Rings are some of the best-selling global books of all time. Nobody looks like a hobbit or a great bearded wizard. Fantasy, manga, video game characters that have global reach for decades by being universally relatable and inspiring, and yet the creators did so without any specific intent to focus on forced diversity as modern writers do. It is only a very recent, narrow trend for writers to say they cannot relate to someone who is a different race, and in turn, they make these diverse stories and character rosters that check off every possible box. You manage to have a diverse audience made up of absolutely nobody at all. So ideologues are handed stewardship when they hate the IP, they hate the creator, they hate the morality, lore of characters, and they absolutely hate the fans. They virtue signal about their DEI traits. So why is every AAA game released with the same stories, characters, and propaganda? Why then is it that we can look at a new modern audience's slop flop trailer and immediately know exactly what they're preaching? Why does BioWare, known for choice-based games, release a game where you have no options on how to talk to and treat companions? Why are mod sites like Nexus now constantly banning legal mods which are only seen by the downloader themselves? Why are activists praising games that take away player agency? Why are character customization options becoming more and more limited? Why is AAA spending more and more money to make games that customers enjoy less and less? They want to force you to enjoy what they tell you to. But as long as you have alternatives, ironically, as long as you have diversity of choice in your products from around the world, you can go to another IP, another game series, another studio. When something pops up like Black Myth Wukong or Stellar Blade from another part of the world, you're free to just enjoy that. And look at how mad that made the activists this year. So they use corporatism to try and buy every IP and destroy everything you like, so you will have no other choice because they have no other choice. There is a modern audience. They might not buy games, but they are making them. Silver lining to all of this, if they keep this up, they won't be making those games for very much longer.